Okay, Mariana, this is fascinating. She's also involved in educating, lives also in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, another Canadian. She developed an interest in traditional Ukrainian, how do you say that? Is pisanki, or how do you say it?
Yes,
Ukrainian
so
egg dye.
The Ukrainian term for it is pisanki, or pisanka if it's singular.
Okay.
But I usually try to avoid it with English-speaking audience, just not to confuse people.
Yes, I've got in-laws who are Ukrainian.
Now I have just sent the link also to the slides that you might be able to open separately.
That's a good idea. Thank you very much. Okay, so I gather you rescued some eggs. I'm very interested in it, and they were going to be thrown out or something. And yeah, and
no, I mean they're not really rescues. Well, some of them you can just buy already emptied for these kinds of purposes, right? So rescuing is a bit of it, but I did rescue some that were normal eating eggs in the processes of things. So,
okay. Anyway, the traditional methods use batik and plant dyes, and the result can be seen in the kiosk, which I thoroughly recommend. It's vying for the title of prettiest display. Mariana's research into natural dyes covers their use at significant historical periods and in various geographical locations, and she's the author of The Cosmic Egg. Big welcome, Mariana. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jenny. So just a quick intro about myself. I'm actually not doing this professionally, at least not yet. I'm in the process of finishing a PhD in philosophy, so the last stages of editing in German philosophy, actually. But this is something that I grew up with, and it is a tradition that actually involves, I like to use the term egg batik because the technique that has been traditionally used is similar to the traditional batik technique. So it is wax resist. When you draw lines with wax, and you can see the sort of a little bit fancier electric wax pen. And this is the only egg in the whole presentation that has not been dyed with natural dyes. I should probably update some of the photos, but I just didn't have any on hand. So you draw the lines on a surface of an egg, and then the wax that you use, the natural beeswax, seals the surface, and then whatever color was under that, under the wax remains like that till the end. And then you put the whole egg into a dye. Then you can actually do it several times progressively. So let's say you put some lines on the white egg, it will stay white. Then you put it in a yellow dye. Then you take it up, color whatever you wanted yellow, put it in a red dye, and so on. Now, in the end, you will most likely in most techniques that vary somewhat from different place to place and different sort of times in history. In the end, you will melt off all the wax, and then so your different colors will come through. I'm on slide 4 now. I should probably be saying this, right? What happened in the past is to a large degree a mystery to us. We know this has been done for a long time, and you can see on the screen the 15th to 16th century egg that was found in archaeological finds in Ukraine, actually in the place that I'm from, in the Western Ukraine. And several of those exist. This is probably the oldest actual bird egg that has been found. This is, they're saying it's not chicken, it's probably duck or goose because it's probably, I guess, of the size. And there have been also all kinds of clay eggs that were decorated and were found that are much older, but this is the oldest we have found of this particular technique kind of eggs in Ukraine. So quite old, but not, we're not talking millennia, though it is most likely that this has been done much longer because the clay eggs that have been found have been much, much older. Now, the tradition itself of doing these eggs has survived. So, for example, I have learned from my grandmother, though in Soviet Union, it was not quite prohibited, but very discouraged to do this publicly. And so a lot of the things that were preserved were actually preserved outside Ukraine in diaspora. And this is a sort of a tradition that is used in many different countries in Eastern Europe, but often they are known as Ukrainian eggs, perhaps because the variety of the patterns and the regional specific things is very high in actually Ukraine. So there are some in Poland and they're very specific. There are some in Hungary and Slovakia, in parts of Germany and Lithuania, and most of them will be very specific. But in Ukraine, you have a wide range of different types and different patterns and different regional sort of specific ways of doing them. Now, whereas the tradition itself of making eggs has survived, the tradition of using natural dyes on them has been almost completely lost. So the only dyes that were still used when I started doing it would be something like onion skin, and they're apparently not particularly fast on eggs. And there are also different ways that eggs are done, and some eggs are done just for Easter and they don't have any particular wax patterns on them, and you don't really care whether they will stay for a long time. Some of them are boiled that you will dye in onion skins, and then you will eat them and things like that. So then it doesn't really matter. But for these kinds of eggs, it really does matter that it is somewhat fast, because now we use them as souvenirs more than what they used to be. Now, in the last 20 years, there have been a lot of experiments of trying to rediscover natural dyes, and mainly learning from textiles. These are some of the bigger eggs that I've played with. You see the ostrich here, emule, and goose, and all dyed with natural dyes. Now, there are some differences between dyeing fabrics and dyeing eggs. And sometimes we will dye whole eggs and we will keep them, or sometimes you will dye the whole egg and then empty it afterwards. Other times you will actually empty the egg first and just dye the shell. So there are different ways of approaching that. But because of the way that the method works with wax, you can only use room temperature dye bath, because if you put your egg with wax covering into the hot dye bath, the wax will melt, and then your ornamentation, your line will be ruined. So that is something that is extremely different from most ways that the fabrics are dyed, though I am seeing more and more now of the cold dyeing or solar dyeing, things like that. Usually the mordants are added directly into the dye bath, though I have tried post-mordanting with iron, just in iron water, and it sort of worked. I have not tried pre-mordanting. Of the mordants, I really only use alum and iron. And I mean, I use sometimes modifiers like cream of tartar, things like that, but I haven't used any other mordants for the reasons of also them not being very friendly. And another difference that is really sort of hit and miss a lot of the times is that some dyes seem to work better or worse on eggs than they do on fabrics. And it seems, for instance, that some of the berry dyes actually work much better on eggs and last much better, and others don't seem to work almost at all. Now, wash fastness is not a factor because you're not going to be washing your souvenirs, so it's not really a problem if a dye is not wash fast for this particular reason. And then there is also other things. A lot of people, I usually don't really do this, but a lot of people actually will put additional coatings onto the eggs or the products they make from eggs, like jewelry and things like that. And those additional coatings, some of them claim to be more natural than others, but they actually might improve the light fastness and might eliminate any issue of water being the factor whatsoever if you can coat them well. Obviously, you can't really do those fabrics that are supposed to be soft, but with the hard surface, there isn't so much a problem of coating it. Though I personally don't really like coating, so I don't usually do that. And then another thing is that some dyeing extraction methods might not work. I had tried indigo labs that were working perfectly well on fabric, and it did absolutely nothing on the egg. And because I don't have chemistry background, which I should probably get some, I don't really understand whether this is something about general, like all kinds of fermentation labs or indigo in particular, and that doesn't seem to be working in this medium. These are some of the turkey eggs I made for an exhibit in Ukraine that was supposed to happen this spring and got postponed to next year. And these are sort of the condition of the exhibit was to do something that was not traditional. So it was an adjustment of traditional technique and traditional motifs, but blending them in a way that normally would not be done. All right, now what do we know about history of this? There are two, I'm on slide 8 by now, by the way. Sorry, I keep forgetting to mention it. There were two catalogs. Actually, one of them was a catalog that you can see it on the right side of the screen here, published in 1899. It was a catalog of a huge collection of folk eggs. And it has an introduction where he actually mentions a little bit about what kind of dyes are being used. There is this one was in the eastern and central part of Ukraine, and then the same year there was a different work published in the western Ukraine about some of the eggs done in the west. So both of these are sort of ethnographic sources. Now the issue with those is these are not the people who made eggs themselves. These are the people who talked to people or talked to people who talked to people. So basically, even though they mentioned some of the natural dyes that were used, there is some confusion there. They seem to be confusing, say, logwood with Brazil wood and things like that. And already at that time, so already by the end of 19th century, there is a huge shift to using chemical dyes, of course, because it is easier, it is more predictable. So same as what happens with fabrics, the shift to using simple, predictable chemical dyes is already occurring. Now, there has been no historical research, actual proper historical research or archaeological research, no chemical analysis of the eggs that have been found or that have been kept in collections. No dyer's manuals. Those might still exist somewhere, so in some archive somewhere, but none of this research has actually been done. And that is to a large extent due to lack of resources and the interest that is starting to well up, but is not quite, has not quite reached the resources. Now, slide 9, some more of the chicken eggs. Now, what is happening now? What is happening now is that there is quite a large group of artists and hobbyists in Ukraine and Eastern Europe who do try and use natural dyes, but most of them don't have access to the dyes. Most of them don't have access to literature on the dyes. Most of them do not read English. And so most of them do not have any access to science and the ways of doing it scientifically. So a lot of this is hit and miss and just sort of trying things sort of randomly. And there is quite a large community of artists in mainly North America and a bit of Western Europe, and egg artists who are many of them actually are making decent living by just doing eggs and selling them, but most of them do not use natural dyes. Maybe it is because of expense, it is also because of inconvenience, time, work, and also lack of recipes. And never mind reliable recipes, lack of any recipes. So, you know, most of you know what it's like when you just start doing this and you have nobody to show you how to do this. Working with natural dyes is not very easy. So I guess it still has not approached. As I mentioned before, besides just making souvenirs, the dyed eggshells can also be used in jewelry. And so there are quite a few people in North America who do this. They dye the eggs as they would do the whole egg, and then they just cut it and then coat it and make earrings and other things from it. And so there is a potential in this particular art form to not just be some sort of very, you know, closed niche thing, but to actually be something that is also useful, something that can be sold, something that can actually thrive, not just for the purpose of being a hobby, but as work, as art that is produced and is appealing to wide audience, not just people who are interested in this particular egg art. Now, this is just some of my logwood experiments, and actually I tried the logwood essence a while ago, and it didn't really work so well for me, but then just recently I tried actual wood chips, and it worked so much better on the eggs. So this is just sort of an interesting thing when technology is sort of not helpful in some ways, or works worse than it would be on fabric. Now I'm on slide 12 now. I'm trying to sort of rush through this so that so that we still have some time. So what has to be done? So besides just historical and archaeological research, the understanding of science behind egg dyeing is non-existent right now in the community that's actually working with eggs. There is what needs to be done is testing, developing, and recording proper recipes, including mordants and modifiers, and proper light fastness studies, including whether it could be improved with coating. And these are just some of the few things off the top of the head that nothing has been done yet. So I feel a little shy presenting at the conference that is supposed to be about the science of things, because the science is exactly what is so far lacking in this practice. And it would be really fascinating to have some science happening and to start getting some results that are scientific and reproducible and reliable. All right, some more eggs. So you can see the MU egg here. This we're on slide 13. The MU egg in the center has not been dyed; it's just been etched with vinegar. And all the other eggs around it are just chicken, both white and brown chicken. It's interesting also, you can achieve different colors with different shells, different natural egg colors. I'll also go back to some slides.
Mariana.
I'm done this time.
We're getting, well,
let me just make one tiny comment.
Please
so,
do. Yes.
Back on slide 7. So these are turkey eggs, and you can see here probably on the egg on the left in the brown sort of this medallion thing, there are speckles. So this is the natural speckling of the turkey egg that in the other eggs and further in this egg, on the yellow egg on the left, has been removed by just etching with vinegar. And then in other slides where we saw the beginning here, the MU egg. So if you see on the left side of the photo, you have an ostrich egg, and on the right side top, you have an MU egg. Both of them have been dyed with exactly the same 2 dyes, the Coreopsis extract for yellow, and the mother and the cochineal extract mix for the red, but you can see how this bluish sort of tint of the MU egg is changing the color of the dye, which is the same here and here. So these are other things that people also do it with fabrics, I guess, with different colors of wool and things like that. So with that in mind, I'm done, and thank you very much for having me here. It is an honor, really.
Thank you for joining us. I'm sure it's food for thought. It was just so different. And I'm sure some of those who are scientists, the cogs are whirring away to think about what's going on, because an eggshell is rather different from most of the substrates that we've worked with. A very big thank you. I'm going to suggest they come and find you in your kiosk for further questions. It's a beautiful kiosk. Do go and look.